the learning sponsors, and then we'll get underway. Year of Learning, Bell and David Adler, in memory of her father, Eliyahu ben Yosef Cohen. Those who inspired by Rebbetzin in America, Shira Shapiro, Sarah Stamaka, but Mishul Misachar, Gail and Leslie Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Mushka Shmutza bat Yosef Chaim Bachava, Hanan ben Moshe Eliezer Bachana, Hesha bat Shmuel Yitzchak Halevi Vitzipora, Isra ben Yoel Moshe Cohen, Bachana, Rexford Friends of Gladys Schumann, Gutta bat Meir, Michael Klein and Friends of Judah Klein, Yehuda Tzvi ben Chaim, Marsha Brana, in memory of her husband Rav Yoachmiel ben Shmuel, friends and family of Arthur Ritholtz, Mordechai Yudel ben Baruch Leib HaKohen, friends and family of Sigi Bessler, Shalom Shraga ben Dov, friends of Marvin Weinstein, Mordechai Ozer ben Yisrael Ahor, Sarah Alpert, in memory of her husband Rav Tzvi Lipa ben Hillel, Rexford friends of Maddie Friedman, Mindel Miriam bat Kalman Ruvain. A month of learning by Susan and Ruvain Podolsky, in memory of her father Simcha Bunam ben Yeshua. A week of learning by Leila Bessler, in memory of her mother-in-law Rachel bat Shalom, by Rabbi Tzvi and Robin Karpel, in memory of his mother Malka bat Mordechai and her mother Chaya Edel bat Menachem Zev. Okay. We have for the 29th, which is actually Monday, which is tomorrow. Okay. It's the Day of Learning by Corinne Greenwald, in memory of her mother Miriam Gisa bat Shalom Shachar. Okay. I want us to start today, before we actually go into the Gemara, which is going to start on Nun Tet Amud Beis, the last line with the new Mishnah. I want to cite, if I may, the psukim that are going to be discussed. Okay, because as I said, the same question that the Gemara asks, I'm asking as I was preparing the Gemara. Okay, so what happens is as follows. If I go to Vayikra, Parshas Bahar Sinai, okay, and I'm in chapter 25, starting with verses 35, 36, and 37. Okay? Says the Pasukim. We're going to do it in Hebrew and in English. V'chi yamuch achicha u'matay yado imach v'hechazakta bo ger v'torasha v'cha imach al tikach me'ito neshach v'tarbit v'yoreta me'elohecha v'chai achicha imach et kaspecha lo titein lo b'neshach u'b'marbit lo titein achlech. And if thy brother grow poor in his means, and his means fail with thee, then that is not the Artsville translation. Then thou shalt relieve him, though he be a stranger or a sojourner, that he may live with thee. Take thou no usury of him, or increase, but fear thy God, that thy brother may live with thee. Thou shalt not give him thy money upon usury, nor lend him thy foodstuffs for increase. So that's the psukim in Vayikra. Then, if we jump for a moment to Dvarim in Parshas Kiteitzah, okay, chapter 23, verse 20, we have the following, says the pasuk. Okay, Lo tashich la'achicha neshech kesef, neshech ochel, neshech kol davar asher yishach. And it goes on, and the pasuk in English, thou shalt not give interest to thy brother, interest of money, interest of foodstuff, interest of anything that is lent upon interest, etc., etc. So I want to just point out from the psukim, it seems to define two different things. Okay, the psukim, it would appear, seems to define, on the one hand, okay, something that we'll call neshech, and associated with kesef, with money. But then it seems to also refer to something that is either neshech ochel, or in the earlier pasuk in Vayikra, okay, what we might call there marbit, and that's connected with ochel. Okay? So it would appear from the psukim that we are talking about two different things: interest or usury, or increase or profit. Okay, one regarding one subject and one regarding another. So I'm suggesting, based on those psukim, that's what we need to, the Gemara is going to try to clarify as we start, okay, eventually, uh, later on, the later part of today's shiur. Okay? But before we get to that, okay, we're still dealing with ona'ah. Okay? And that's what I'm going to suggest our initial piece of Gemara starts with, that there could be ona'ah, some sort of fraud, extortion. Having discussed ona'ah in buying and selling, mekach umemkach, then having discussed ona'at varim, okay, verbal exploitation or verbal abuse, we now see the Mishnah, I'm suggesting, continues with another kind, what we would call today consumer protection. Okay? I'm going to use that term in a general concept. Okay? So I'm picking up on our Nuntet Amud Beis, the bottom line. Okay, our new Mishnah. Ein ma'arvin b'peirot b'peirot, says our Mishnah. One is not to mix or mingle what we'll call certain produce, particularly from one supplier, okay, that might be right, to another. Okay, afilu chadashim b'chadashim. Not only shouldn't you mix old produce with new produce, okay, but you can't mix new produce with new produce, okay, because we're going to say that even though the issue is about the purchaser, okay, there may be a loss here. Okay? And we go on now to the top of Sam. Ve'ein tzarich lomar chadashim v'yeshanim. And certainly we don't have to say then, if you can't mix new with new, certainly then you shouldn't mix old with new. Why? Because, says the Gemara, that we're going to be lowering the value in that situation. Be'emet amru. And when we have the phrase be'emet amru, we're going to see the Gemara is going to tell us that is a key term for understanding halakha. Right? Biyayin hitiru la'arev kasha barach mipnei shehu mashbicho. However, says the Gemara, in truth, which means this is the halakha, okay, it is permissible to mix strong wine with weaker wine because we say that that improves the quality of the wine. Ein ma'arvin shemrei yayin biyayin. We don't, however, mix the sediment with the wine, biyayin. Aval noten lo et shmarav, says our Mishnah. But one can give its sediment, which I'm going to say is, the Gemara is going to suggest to us, it's okay to give the old wine sediment with the old wine, or the new wine sediment with the new wine, but again, you don't mix old sediment with new wine, or new sediment with old wine. And let's see what the Gemara tells us. Mi shenit arev mayim b'yayin, and one who mixes water with the wine, lo yimkarenu b'chanut, he should not be selling it in his store. Ela im kain hodi'enu, unless he informs, and who does he have to inform? The seller has to inform the buyer. Okay? So that's why I call this consumer law. Okay? So what happens? Ela im kain hodi'enu. Velo the tagar, nor should the seller, in other words, the producer perhaps of the wine, sell it to a merchant, afapi shahodio, unless he informs him. Okay? Now, we're going to come back to this issue shortly in the Gemara. She'ino ela leramot bo. Why? Because we're concerned that the merchant might use this wine and cheat somebody. Okay? Makom shenahagu lahatil mayim biyayin, in a place where it was the common custom to, let's say, add water to the wine, which I guess we might call it filter it or make it a little less, right? Mayim biyayin. Yatilu hataga, okay, yatilu. It's permitted. Why? Because people are aware of the fact that that's the common practice in that location. Hatagar notel. Okay, so we now get to another part. Hatagar, in terms of the merchant, notel michamisha granot. If the merchant acquires his grain from 5 different, let's say, sellers, okay, or 5 different granaries, okay? In that case, v'notein letoch megura achat. It is permissible then for him to put that all into a single silo. Michamisha gitot v'notein letoch pitum achat. Or if he acquires it from 5 different wine presses, exactly, and he may put it into a single cask. Ubilvad shelo yehei mitkavein la'arei. But that is so long as he's not with the intent to mix them. Okay, now we get to our Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Braita. Ein tzarich lamar. We certainly don't have to say, as we refer to in our Mishnah, chadashot me'arba. We're talking about, right, for a new material from, right, from, 5 threshing floors, okay, at a price of 4, okay, namely 4 seah per seller, v'yishanot mishalosh, and old produce at a price of 3 seah per seller, okay, de'ein ma'arvin ela afilu chadashot mishalosh v'yishanot be'arba, because we don't even mix, right, when we have new produce at 3 seah per seller versus old produce at 4 seah per seller. Ein ma'arvin mipnei she'adam rotzeh lishnan. Why? Because here we say, even though it would think that newer produce would be superior, what happens is people want to purchase the new one for the main reason of allowing it to stand, to let it get old. Okay? So, what about the fact that we had this phrase in the Gemara, be'emet, right? Amru, and we said, what does that tell us? Bain, okay, bayayin, hitiru la'arev kasher, berach. Okay, when we use that phrase, that in truth we said as follows, that was exemplified by taking wine, where we permitted mixing the stronger wine with the weaker wine. Because it improves the quality of the wine. Amar Rebbe Eliezer, or Rebbe Elazar, okay, Ada Amra, up to this point, what did we say? Kol be'emet amru, any time we see the phraseology, in truth they tell us, halachahi, that tells us that that's the actual law in that case. Amar Rav Nachman, says Rav Nachman, okay, ubein hagitot shanu, but we taught this when it was in the wine production season, when we're dealing with different wine presses, okay? Va'idna, but today, okay, in other words, in Rav Natan's day, dekama arve, where they do mix the wine, shalo bein hagitot, is it permissible then to do this not during the time that they might be mixing the products of the wine presses? Amar Rav Papa, says Rav Papa, Diyade v'kam machle. Because why in this day, okay, people are aware of it and they waive, they pass it off. Okay, they don't make an issue of it. Okay. Rav Acha Berei de Rav Ika Amar. He says, yes, says as follows. Hamani, according to whom is this view? Rabbi Acha, he. Okay, it's according to the view of Rabbi Acha. Tanya, who teaches in a Braita, Rabbi Acha matir b'davar hanit'am. Rabbi Acha holds that it's permitted to do this mixing because people are going to test it, taste it, okay, by initially before they buy the product. Okay? All right, let's go on now. Back to our Mishnah. Ve'en ma'arvin shimra yayin b'yayin aval noten lo et shmarav. We do not mix its sediment wine with its, okay, with another wine, is what we're saying. We said, that's what we said. Right, we said we'd mix the old sediment with old wine, could mix the new sediment with new wine, but you don't flip it. I'll use that moment. Vaha amarta. But didn't you say earlier, Resha, in the earlier part of a Baita, ein ma'arvin klal, that we shouldn't be mixing whatsoever? Why do we have to include even this statement about the sediment? Exactly. V'chitema. And if you want to say, mai noten lo et shmarav, what does it mean when we say we give its sediment? The kamodele, that he's acknowledging and he's informing the buyer. Ha, midikatane sefer. But from what's taught later at the end of our Braita, lo yimkarenu bechanut. One should not sell it in a store. Ela im kain modio, unless one clearly informs the buyer. Velo letagar, afal pisha modio, and you don't sell it to a merchant, even though you do inform him. Miklal the resha afal gav de lo modale. It's because there we must understand that the earlier part of the Braita is a situation where one doesn't inform the buyer. Okay? Amar Rav Yehuda. According to Rav Yehuda, Hachika Amar. This is what it's trying to tell us. Ein ma'arvin shmarim shel emesh b'shel yom. We do not mix the sediment of last night's wine with today's wine. Okay? Velo shel yom b'shel emesh, and not with that of today's wine with last night's wine. Aval noten lo et shmarav, but you can give its sediment to the appropriate wine, right? Last night's sediment to last night's wine, today's sediment to today's wine. Okay? Tanya nami hachi, and we have a Braita that says as follows: Rabbi Yehuda, Omer says Rabbi Yehuda, hashofet yayin lechavero, one who pours wine slowly to his friend or colleague. Harei ze lo ya'arev shel emesh v'shel yom, should not mix that of last night with today. V'lo shel yom v'shel emesh, and not of today with last night. Aval ma'arev shel emesh v'shel emesh, but he may mix last night's wine with last night, v'shel yom b'shel yom, and today's wine with today's. Back to our Mishnah. Mi shenit arev mayim b'yayin. No. Harei ze lo yimkarenu b'chanut, ela im kein modio b'chulei. So he said that you can't mix the water with the wine and sell it in the store unless you inform it. Okay? Rabbah. Now we've got a little story about Rabbah. What is he regarding him? What happened? Aitule chamra mechanuta. They once brought him wine from the store. Mazge, added water to it. Tame, he tasted it. Lo have basima, okay? And it was not tasty. It didn't seem right. What did he do? Shadre lechanuta. He returned it to the store. Okay? Now, doesn't that seem problematic if our Mishnah already tells us that you shouldn't be putting water in and giving it to the store to be sold? Okay, how could Rava do such a thing? Amar le Abaye. And so Abaye questions, Vaha anantnan. But aren't we taught in the Mishnah? Velola tagar afal pisha hodion. And you shouldn't even return it to the merchant, okay, for today. Why? Unless you inform him. Amarle, he says, right, even when you're right. Amarle, so he answers, Mazgadidi. So Rava's answer to Abaye is that my style of pouring, in other words, my diluting with water, okay, miyada yadia is well known. Okay, that's why the double lashon there. Okay, in other words, v'chi tema detafe umechale, and if you want to say that it's done, right? How? That it is done right, as part of the wine pressing process. In other words, it's before the wine becomes fermented in this situation. Umezavin le, and we sell it to him. In Cain, aim the davar sof. Okay, it's just going to go on and on and on. Situation. Okay. Makom shenahagu lahatil mayim biyayin yatilu. In a place where we know it's customary to do that practice of adding the water to the wine. Okay, says the Gemara now. Tana lamechse, it's taught he could do it halfway. Lishlish, a third of the way. L'ravia, a quarter of the way. Marav, ubein hagitot shano. And this was taught again during the time when it was the wine being pressed and before fermentation. Okay? Our new Mishnah, right? What? It's the during the with the wine together. Okay. All right, let's go on now. We get a new Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda says as follows, Omer, Lo yichalekachem vani klayot. I kept thinking of Irwin, okay, when I was preparing this mission. Irwin had a store, okay, in Staten Island, and he used to tell that when kids would come in, he would give them cookies, okay, right? So I was reminded of that with this Mishnah. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo yichalek haken vani klayot ve'egozim l'tinokot, that one shouldn't give out nuts and other things to the children. Mipnei shehu margilan lavo etzlo, because it gets them used to coming to his store. The kids, I want to go to so-and-so's store because I'll get free goodies there. Okay? Lavo etzlo. Okay? V'chachamim matirim, but the sages permitted. So we can tell Erwin it was okay to give out free cookies to the kids. Okay? V'lo yifrot et right? Ha'sha'ah. Why? Because, and one should not reduce the price. Okay? V'chachamim omrim zachur latov. In other words, one shouldn't go give sales, all right, of their products against their competitors. Okay? But the sages say that's to be well done. Lo yivor et hagrisin. One should not sift the crushed beans at the top of the bin. Okay? Divrei Abasho. Okay, according to Abasho. V'chachamim matirin. And the sages had permitted. Umodim shelo yivor me'alpi megura. But they shouldn't be doing it clearly simply the beans on the very top of the bin. Why? She'eno ella kigonev et ha'ayin. Because it's really, okay, you're stealing the eye. In other words, what are you doing? You're pulling something over on the consumer. Okay? Ein mifar chasim. This was a, okay, I like this. Okay, one shouldn't beautify. Okay? In other words, lo et ha'adam. In other words, one shouldn't change the appearance of a servant or slave. Velo et ha'behema, right? Avid kanan, right? Right? That's right. Velo et ha'behema, and not of an animal. Velo et ha'kelim, and not of utensils. Okay, what are we talking about? Says the Gemara, Mai Tamahu, what's the reasoning? The Rabbanan, what's the rabbi's rationale? The Amarle, why? Because we could say to one, Ana mafligna gozai. The owner could say, I happen to distribute nuts, va'at lige shisti, and you happen to distribute juju beads or prunes or something. Okay? Below you've quoted right? At se'ar, hashar, one shouldn't reduce the price. But the sages say it's acceptable. My tamid the rabbanan. Again, what's the reasoning of the sages, right? Mishum dekar marvach latara. Why? Because he eases or lowers, according to some, the market price. Right? Okay, and that he shouldn't, as we said, basically sift, right, the beans. Divrei Abba. That's the view of Abba. V'chachamim matirim, and the sages permit. Man chachamim. Which sages? Rabbi Acha. It's Rabbi Acha. The Tanya Rabbi Acha, who teaches matir b'davar hanir'eh. He permits it in regards to where it's obvious, where the consumer can see what's happening. Ein mefarchasin lo et ha'adam b'chulei v'lo et ha'kelim. We don't beautify, right, the Eved Kanani in this case, or the kelim, or the utensils. Tana Rabbanan. Ein misharbatin et ha'behema. We don't stiffen or straighten the hair of an animal, right? Ve'ein nofchin b'kravayim. Not only that, but we don't put air into the intestines to make them look larger, right? Ve'ein shorin et habasar b'mayim. And we don't put the meat in water to make it more attractive, right? Right? My, what do we mean? Ein misharbatin. What do we mean when we say stiffen the hair? Hacha, in this case, tigamu maya bechizora. Okay, one might explain it by saying that they feed the animal brain water. Okay, it expands it, right? Ze'iriyama, okay, that's in the name of Rav Kahana, mizakta, okay, that they brush their hair. Shmuel shara lemirma. Shmuel, however, permitted, okay, to do certain things. In this case, the mirma tume the sarbala, be able to attach fringes to certain garments, right, for attraction. Rav Yehuda shara the kaskuse karme, and Rabbi Yehuda permitted a situation to stitch other things, garments. Rabba shara the medak tzarara, okay, he permitted, right, to paint arrows. I think that's the case, right? Rabba shara letzlume gire, and Rabba permitted again to attach certain things to the wicket baskets. Rav Papa bar Shmuel shara letzlume dekule, right? And that was that one, to permit that. In other words, they did permit some to new items. They would permit certain things to old items. They would not permit certain beautification, as if to make it look like new items. That's what the Gemara is going to tell us. Vaha anantnan, and here we teach ein mefarchasin lo et ha'adam, but it says one shouldn't beautify a person. In other words, we're going to see a servant. Velo et behema, nor the animal. Velo et kelim, and no utensils. Lo kasha. That's really not problematic. Why? Ha bechadate. Here we're talking about the new items. Ha ba'atike. Here we're talking about old items. So new items, when you first make it, you can make it look attractive. Fix it up. Okay. Now, Hirchas de Adam, Mayihi. So what do we mean by making a person more attractive? Okay, interesting story. Kiha dahahu avda saba. Like this elderly Canaanite slave. The azil save, the reshe uladikne. And what did he do? He painted, in other words, he dyed his hair and his beard from white to black. Okay? All right? Atalakame de Rabba. He came before Rabba. Amarle Zivnin. Okay, he says, I'm for sale. Don't you want to buy me, so to speak? Amarle Yahu Aniyim B'nei Beitecha. Let your children fend for themselves, so to speak. Okay? Atalakame de Rav Papa Bar Shmuel. He then went before Rav Papa Bar Shmuel, Zavne, who purchased him. Yom Echad, one day, Amar Ashkayin Maya. He asked the servant to bring me, go schlep a lot of water, a pail or something heavy, I'm assuming. Azal Chavare Lareshe Uladikne. What did the servant do? He went back, he removed the dye from his hair and from his face, so it was white again. Okay? Amarle, and he says to Rav Papa Bar Shmuel, Chaze da'ana kashish me'avayich. I'm even older than your father, and you're telling me to do this schlepping, this work, right? Kare nafshe, and therefore, okay, what happened? Rav Papa Bar Shmuel says, as I understood it, Sadik mitzara nechalatz v'yavo achar tatar. The righteous is delivered out of trouble. In other words, that refers to Rabbah, and another comes in his stead, and that refers to me. Okay, now we get to we'll start the new parak. Okay, and here's where we deal with, okay, Neshech and Tarbit, the psukim that I suggested at the very outset, where they seem to imply two different things, one in regarding money and one regarding foodstuffs. Okay? So what happens? Says our Mishnah and then the Gemara. Ezahu neshech. What is it that we call interest or usury? Ve'ezahu tarbit. And what is it that we call increase or profit? Right? Ezahu neshech. What is the example of neshech? Remember, neshech means to bite. So it's like you take a bite out of the person because you're taking something that really isn't appropriate, right? Hamalveh sela, okay, one who loans a sela, a coin worth 4 dinar, be-chamishad dinarim, and expects to get paid back 5 dinar, right? Or take another example. Sa'atayim chitin, okay, he loans 2 seah of wheat and expects to get paid back with 3. Asur mipnei shehu nosher. That is forbidden because he is taking interest. Ve'ezahu tarbit. And what then do we call? By the way, notice in that definition of neshech that they use both money and they use the wheat. They use both as examples. Okay? So that's already tells us. Okay, that's the interest, right? So in other words, how does that knock out the idea that one only applies to money and one only applies to foodstuffs? Okay? By using two examples for the same thing, for neshek. Okay? Now we go on. Ve'ezahu tarbit. What do we say is increase or profit? Hamar bebe perot ketzad. One who wants to increase in regards to his produce. How might it be done? Lakach himenu chitin b'dinar zahav hakur. He purchases, okay, from the other one wheat at a value of one gold, right, dinar for a kur, for a certain measurement, right? V'chein hasar, okay, and likewise the other, right? What happens? Amdu chitin v'chein hashar, and so what happens? The price increases, right? Chitin bishlosha dinar, okay, and now the item is worth 3 dinar. 30, I'm sorry, shloshim dinar, right? Amarlo, right, 25, right? So now it's worth 30, right? One gold dinar is equal to 25 silver dinars, right? And then what happens? It went up to 30. Okay? I got to look at my notes too. Amarlo, he said to him, Tein li chitim, she'ani rotzeh lemochran v'likach v'hen yain. Give me my wheat, because I want to sell it in order to purchase wine. And what does the other fellow tell him? Amarlo, harei chitech, here's your wheat, asuyot alai b'shloshim, and you, right, it's worth 30, okay? V'harei lecha etzli b'hen yayin, but I'll give it to you, I'll give you the wine for that equivalent, okay? The yayin aimlo, and he doesn't have any wine to sell. Okay? So what happens? Gemara, okay? Midishavek, the Rivit Doraita, since he has put aside, so to speak, a discussion of interest or usury from the Torah, v'kam mefaresh Rabbanan, and instead he's explaining it according to the view of the rabbis. Miklal deoraita, it would appear though, in general, that from the Torah, the neshech v'tarbit chada miltahi, that they are really one and the same thing. Vaha kara'ai kative. And here we have the verses, which I read to everybody earlier, right? Neshech kesef v'ribit ochel. It would appear from the verses that neshech deals with money and ribis deals with foodstuffs, right? Right? V'tisbara, and this seems logical. De'ika neshech below tarbit, because you could have usury without profit. Tarbit below neshech, and you could have increase or profit without interest or usury. Neshech below tarbit, hechidami. How is it possible, asks the Gemara, that you could have interest or usury without profit or increase? Right? The izufe mea b'mea ve'esrim. If you're going to loan him 100 prutot, let's say, and expect 120 in return, mi'ikara kaimi mea bedinka. Or if it's based on original value, okay, then you're getting the 100 at 1/6, right? Ulavaso kaime mea ve'esrim bedinka. But at the end, okay, you're getting 120, which is still only the 1/6. Neshech ika. In that case, we have usury or interest, right? Dekat nachit lay, because that's what he gains. Then who goes down? Dekashakil mine mide de lo yahi. Okay, because he receives from him something he didn't have, something more. V'tarbit leka, but there is no profit there. Delete lay ravacha, because there is no clear profit. It's still only 1/6. Okay? The dinka usfe. Why? Because he loaned him basically 1/6. Okay? Vidinka kasha kilmine. And he's getting that 1/6 back from him. Sof, what happens? Ibatar me ikara aslan. But if you go based on the original value of the money, what happens? Hare neshech. There is usury or interest there. Vahare tarbit. And there is going to be an increase or profit. Ibatar basov aslat. But if you go after, at the end of the exchange, lo neshechika, there is no usury or interest there. Velo tarbitika, and there is no profit or increase there. The two, tarbit below neshechechidami. And furthermore, if we're talking about increase of profit, okay, without, right? How can that be without any usury, right? E de azif meya, right? Okay. The meya, if you're going to say that he loans him 100 and expects 100 in return, meikara, kaime meya bedinka. Okay, originally, okay, he established 100, which was the 6th. Levasof meya bechumsha. And ultimately, at the end, okay, it's 100, but it's only a 5th. Ibatar meikara. If he goes after, okay, the deal at the end, Azlat, if that's the case, lo neshachika velo tarbitika. There is neither usury interest or increase of profit. Ibatar sof azlat. But if you're following at the end, okay, of what happened at the after the transaction, hare neshech v'hare tarbit. Here then we have interest or usury, and we have increase or profit. Ela amar Rava, but rather Rava says as follows: I atomot say lo neshech below tarbit. You cannot find, says Rava, interest or usury without some profit or increase. Below tarbit, below neshech, and you don't find increase or profit without some kind of interest or usury. Below chelkan hakatuv, and the psukim did not divide them up, ela la'avor alav b'shnei lavim, but instead to teach us that you're actually transgressing two different prohibited situations. Okay, and we're going to stop right there for today. Ruvain, is your brother, son-in-law here? You're going to go back with him?